360 Sports. Today we have a Super Bowl recap show for you guys. I'm Sophia here with Haley, Jacob, and Brendan. And the camera just turned on, but we were having an Eagles-Chiefs football debate, and it's going to continue on the air because we have a lot to talk about. A lot happened last night. We have this half of the table isn't very happy. This half of the table is. So I'm very excited to see what you guys have to say. But as we all know, the Philadelphia Eagles secured that Super Bowl championship in the 59th Bowl after creating three turnovers, sacking Patrick Mahomes 6 times, and the Eagles cruised to the 40-22 victory. What do you think about the game? You're not satisfied with it, but I'll start with you, Jacob.
I mean, to me, the Eagles just won this on the defensive line. You mentioned the 3 turnovers. They forced 2 of them, Those 3 turnovers resulted in a combined 17 points. They had 6 sacks on Patrick Mahomes, as you mentioned, a forced fumble as well. Josh Sweat was unbelievable last night, and I think that's really what made the difference in the game.
I think we got to start having a conversation with this Eagles team in terms of the upper echelon as far as talent on a single team, on any team, Super Bowl winning or not. I mean, top to bottom, when your weakest link on the team is arguably your quarterback. That says a lot, especially when Hurts had a good game yesterday. If that is what you're relying on to be the weak link, when you've got a top 3 offensive line, probably top defensive line, top secondary, you're the best running back in the game, some of the best weapons in the game. I mean, it's just one of the best collections of talent we've ever seen.
And I think on top of that, too, one of the best coaching staffs in the NFL.
For sure.
Like, not discrediting Nick Sirianni, but forget Nick Sirianni. Everyone below him is, I think, the best in the NFL when it comes to Kellen Moore, who's obviously now going to be gone, and Vic Fangio, one of the top coordinator duos in the NFL. Probably the best offensive line coach in the NFL, up there with the best defensive line coaches in the NFL. From top to bottom, they're just stacked.
I totally agree. Eagles defense and Eagles offense came out. Yesterday, the defense was unstoppable between Sweat, Williams, DeJean. It was crazy. And then on the offensive side, maybe Saquon wasn't as productive as most Eagles fans would have wanted yesterday, but the defense surely made up for it.
My thing is, though, as to why I thought they deserved that, though, everything you just named, every good part of their team. That's what the NFL's been looking for. We've been looking for a team that's okay, your QB isn't the only person.
And I'm not here to discredit the Eagles win. I think they absolutely deserved it. I mean, from kickoff to the final whistle, they were absolutely the better team. And it's looked that way throughout the playoffs. They had one close game against the Rams that arguably looked a lot closer because the Rams made a last-minute comeback. But it's not just one of the most dominant teams, one of the most dominant playoff runs that we've ever seen. They absolutely deserve this.
And it's because of how dominant they are in the trenches on the offensive end.
That's where it started and ended.
Which I'm proud to see because I feel especially a year or two ago, I felt the quality of football wasn't getting so great. And all those names, I know Jalen Hurts did win the MVP last night, but a lot of people that weren't QBs weren't even in contention. And that's because they were kind of being shadowed by you have a great QB or you have a great wide receiver or you have a great running back. And then everything else doesn't really come to play. I feel like the Eagles are finally that prodigy team that you can see what hard work over the years and what building a team paid off as. Building up that coaching staff. You can see there's brains behind it too, putting that together because they're not just relying on one key team. I've been waiting for a defense to start making those plays and to make those turnovers but it doesn't really, to me, discredit what the offense is doing. It's just an equal great effort on both sides.
I would have to agree. I just don't think it's the premier positions on offense that we're used to seeing. These last 5 years, it's been the quarterbacks. Those have been the centerpieces of the teams. That's how it's been for arguably the last 2 decades. You go back to the Patriots dynasty with Brady. This is a team, it almost feels like they came straight out of the 90s where you're building not necessarily around the quarterback. The quarterback is an extension of what you play off of. They have the best rushing attack in the league this year. They're the best secondary in the league. They forced turnovers at an unbelievable rate. The quarterback, what he had to do was just an extension of the football team.
Well, and I think that's kind of the shift that we're starting to see in the NFL now, too. We talked about how the game, right around the mid-2010s, you started to see it became much more geared towards the passing game. And you saw those high-powered offenses with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes being the best example of it. But it started to happen again last year, but then you really saw it pick up again this year when there was talk about how the too high safety had kind of killed the passing games. Now teams are starting to rely on that run game more. And I think a perfect example is one of the teams you mentioned, the LA Rams. They were so far geared towards the passing game that they ended up, Todd Gurley became nowhere. He just became a nobody. And he was the offensive player of the year a year or two before he was out of the league. And I think he's around the same age as Patrick Mahomes, as crazy as that is to say. And even they're now relying on the run game a lot more. and that was the Eagles' bread and butter this year. It didn't really show again yesterday. Yesterday was predominantly just a defense, but Saquon Barkley was, to me, the MVP. I would have voted Saquon Barkley MVP.
I would vote him MVP. Like, overall, yes, I would vote him MVP.
Yeah.
Like, maybe not yesterday, but
No, I'm
never,
saying
No,
as
yeah.
the NFL MVP,
Oh,
I would
yes,
have voted
okay,
him.
yes.
I thought
Okay,
you
I
were
thought
talking
you meant
about yesterday.
No.
I was like,
I'm
what game
saying
did we watch?
league MVP
Yes,
over Josh Allen and
1,000%.
Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
1,000%. And that's why, though, I even credit, like, I guess, like, we're doing a Super Bowl recap. So it's hard to, like, look back into, like, the entire season and, like, what they've been doing. But it's just everything that they've done, I think, from the first game. Because from the first game, Saquon's been, like, blowing people's minds. He came into Philadelphia from the Giants. It's like you expected him to be good because, you know, he was coming off the Giants, not so great of a team. But, like, I think for being first year on this new team, like, going to the Super Bowl, I think he overperformed than what most running backs could have done, especially, like, breaking records and things like that.
That's
But-
because I think he's the most talented back in the
Yeah.
league.
Oh,
Which-
100%.
For sure.
Which is great that the Eagles got to him. And I think that's like what the whole idea is, though, of like what other teams should be looking at to
Mhm.
like not only think about, let me recruit the absolute best person I can find in the league and forget everyone else. Just more of like building everyone. Like, I feel like that wasn't a build that had like specifically like Jalen Hurts in mind. Like, they're thinking about like a whole franchise type of thing, something that's going to last more than whatever his contract is, like something that could build them up for like reputation. Do you know what I mean?
I agree.
So, well, the Chiefs, though, on the other hand, we're talking all about the Birds, but the Chiefs fell short of that first three-peat in the modern era with that loss last night, which is something that a lot of people you're not so happy about. But the offensive line struggled to protect Patrick Mahomes, and the defense could not stop the Eagles' aerial attack. What do you think the Chiefs go? Where do they go from here? Because I feel like this is a ripple in their like reputation and in their like playing that we haven't seen. So, like, what are you thinking, Ellie?
I'm thinking, I thought they were frauds all season long, to be honest. Like, they were barely finding ways to win, and they didn't score more than 30 points until the playoffs. And they honestly didn't impress me at all. I did not think they were going to make it as far as they did. Although, like, Mahomes had a good passing game in the second half, and Worthy obviously ended up with 2 touchdowns. I don't think necessarily that they have to change anything. I just think it was a bad game for them. And it was
Bad
just,
time to have a
yeah,
bad game.
unfortunate time. Yeah.
Yeah. What are you guys thinking?
I think you kind of mentioned it, but I think they do need to make changes because I don't think this was really a Super Bowl caliber team.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, they somehow, like, all they did was win. And I don't know how they managed to pull it off. It was like, you couldn't explain it. They just won almost every game.
Yes, that's
and
exactly.
I couldn't put words to it. But then I thought the thing that gave me hope for this team going into last night was I thought that game against Buffalo was their best game of the year.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I thought they actually performed to a high level in that game of a championship caliber team. But then last night, I mean, their weaknesses showed. They weren't strong enough on the offensive line. And I think they had made it to this point without that star receiver. But I think now they have to go out and get one because I think that's only worked for so long. And when you're facing a team like the Eagles have in the secondary, DeAndre Hopkins not being the player that he once was cannot be your number one receiver. And then they obviously have to bolster the offensive line because what we saw last night wasn't enough. I think probably a little bit more on the interior because I think they've got 2 solid tackles. They didn't play well last night, but I think they do need to bolster the interior of that offensive line.
Yeah.
I think we're forgetting this team is the class of the AFC. I mean, there's not many drastic changes they have to make.
No.
Sure, they had a horrid game yesterday. But you've got this guy as your quarterback for probably the next decade. You can't count them out at any point.
No. I'm not counting them out for the rest of like I'm not counting them out. I just am like wondering as to like what could bring them back because this could send some teams into a spiral and not be good for.
I agree,
couple
but I think
seasons.
that happens to the inexperienced teams, the teams that
Correct,
haven't done this before. As long as Andy Reid is your coach, who has been everywhere, it seems like in the league, he's been around the block a couple times. He knows what to do in the face of adversity. A lot of times they've relied on Mahomes to kind of be this superhuman and do everything himself.
Right.
And he tried to do it again
He
last
tried to
night,
do it last
and
night,
it
and
didn't work.
The offensive line wasn't good enough. He certainly did not play well. I'm not going to say that, not going to try and defend him too much. He did not play a good game, but you just got to slowly add those pieces as he starts to get a little older. He's still 29 years old, not even 30 yet. As long as you slowly add those pieces as he starts to get up there in age, this team's going to be fine.
And I think the other thing that really hurt the Chiefs last night was you saw them start to make those adjustments in the second half, but it was too little too late.
Yeah.
Mahomes was trying to be that superhuman that we saw him when they played against the Buccaneers and their offensive line was depleted. And actually, in that game, he was making the plays, but his receivers weren't.
Yeah.
But last night, they didn't make the adjustments quick enough. And then in the second half, you finally saw some quick passes to get him going. And then they hit the deep shot to Xavier Worthy. Had they done that much earlier in the game, I think they would have had a chance, but they didn't make the adjustments quick enough. And you saw him so many times. How many times did he step up into the pocket trying to create or scramble with the ball, stepped right into the pass rush?
Yeah, I agree with that. I also remember I watched the play, and the one thing about Mahomes, and that I think that though this isn't, though he had a bad game, I don't think this is a Mahomes problem.
No,
it's not.
No, because even though yesterday I was watching and he was like running around, like looking for playing the run, looking for a shot, he was running around there for a good like 15, 20 seconds. Like nobody was tackling him. And I think that shows though his focus, his calmness, his agility, being able to play around those movements that a great quarterback can do, like him. But I think it's also though people gave him, I mean, it's understandable, but people gave him that whole Tom Brady GOAT thing above Tom Brady too early.
Yeah,
where it
very
was,
premature.
Yeah. Because again, like you said, 29 years old. He has literally the rest of his career to make those things. And it's like no one's done that three-peat before. So it's kind of like not that it's like I'm trying to say, I think the standards for Patrick Mahomes, not that I want to say they were set too high. I just think that people shouldn't be docking his reputation because of this game. I think it's now a Chiefs conversation, like a Chiefs as a whole, a management conversation. Like, what do we do so that doesn't happen again? Because you can't have your worst game of the season be the Super Bowl.
And especially Mahomes, as far as NFL fandom goes, him and the jersey, the logo he's wearing on his chest, he's not a very likable guy amongst fans because he wins.
Yeah.
So last night for him to have a horrible game, NFL fans, they ate that up. They loved that he had a bad game. There are very few quarterbacks, I think, in the history of the game that would have succeeded in that situation. To be able, from the Eagles standpoint, to put your best secondary in the league all out in coverage, you didn't have to blitz once, and you just let your defensive line get to him basically every single play. No quarterback was going to be able to really succeed under those circumstances. Again, he looked jittery. He looked not confident in his offensive line, but there aren't many quarterbacks that would have succeeded. I don't think it's necessarily a Mahomes problem, like you said.
No, he didn't play particularly well last night, but he's not at the top of the list of the reasons why the Chiefs lost that game.
Well, we've done a lot of conversation now about Chiefs, Eagles. Now let's go a little more in depth, like our players, who's overperformed and underperformed. We're going to do a board segment for this one, and we have Brendan going up first to show us who he thinks under and overperformed.
So my overperformer for this game was my pick to win Super Bowl MVP. It was Montez Sweat. As we've mentioned a lot on the show already, the Eagles' defensive line absolutely dominated this game, and he was the main reason why. 6 tackles, 2.5 sacks. It would have been tough to give him the MVP just because every D lineman played well. Really, every player for the Eagles played well. I understand why you give it to Jalen Hurts just because he is the quarterback and he did accumulate stats, I think, worthy enough for a Super Bowl MVP. But this was the game record. He was getting to Mahomes all night. He was flushing him out of the pocket, flushing him forward into disruption. He had 2.5 sacks. He might have caused 5 of them. I mean, he had a fantastic game, I think, worthy of Super Bowl MVP. On the other side, my underperforming player was Jawaan Taylor of the Chiefs. He has been a fine right tackle all year. He is the 3rd highest paid right tackle this year, and he had a horrid game. Not necessarily the worst performance of any Chiefs lineman, which is crazy to say because he did not play well. I think Joe Thuney had a worse game. I think Caliendo had a worse game. But when you are relied on as the guy, you are the right tackle of the team. You are protecting Mahomes. You're protecting not his blind side. You're protecting the other side. He can see what's coming. If you have him that rattled, that flustered, when he can see what's coming, you did not have a good game. It's crazy to say. He was not the worst lineman in that game, but he played horrible. And if you're the 3rd highest paid player at your position, you cannot have that kind of game in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's very fair.
Yeah.
That's definitely very fair. Now we have Haley looking at your over and underperformed.
Right. So for my overperformer, I had Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy, despite not having a Super Bowl ring this morning, he had 157 yards for 2 touchdowns. I mean, that's difficult to do in a Super Bowl against one of the top defenses in the NFL. Like, you have to give him some sort of credit, but I bet he is not very happy today. I feel a little bit bad for him, but he tried his best. Now, on the other side of things, my underperformer, as much as it pains me to say, I had to go with Saquon Barkley. I mean, 57 yards, no touchdowns, and he carried his team throughout the entire season, but he couldn't do it yesterday. I mean, I kind of predicted it because how the Chiefs coming in, you have to obviously make sure Saquon does not get that ball and does not go far with the ball, because we know obviously what he can do when he gets the ball. But yeah, I was really sad to see that Saquon did not perform as well as I wanted him to. But he does now have his first Super Bowl ring, and he was celebrating a ton last night, and I'm sure today.
Yeah, I don't blame him for celebrating that. Right? I mean, you go from the Giants, then you get to the Eagles, and you get a ring. So it's like, how else? But
Yeah.
Jacob?
I completely agree with you, though. I think if you had told me that Saquon Barkley was going to run the ball 25 times for 57 yards, I'd have said Chiefs winning easily. If you had told me that before the game, I'd have said the Chiefs have this in the bag.
Yeah.
And I was impressed with how well they shut him down. But
Yeah, it's your turn now. You can go to the board and show us your over and underperformed.
All right. For my overperformer, I had Williams, the interior defensive lineman. Really, you'll see with my underperformer who I had, this guy really took over for that. I think he had 2 sacks, was applying pressure on Patrick Mahomes all night. Also had the forced fumble in the game in the second half. So he was all over the place, really pushing the pressure back on Mahomes, which didn't allow him to step up, as I had mentioned before. And then for my underperformer was Jalen Carter, just not at his best as we had seen him in the playoffs. He was really the one grabbing the attention on this Eagles defensive line. But Williams and Davis took over for him instead. So he didn't have a single tackle last night, I don't think. I think he had a couple QB hits, but just not as best as we've seen him. But obviously it didn't matter.
And that's what's crazy about this Eagles team is that Saquon Barkley is undeniably an underperformer. Milton Williams is undeniably an underperformer. And you
Jalen
still
Carter.
Jalen Carter is the underperformer. Milton Williams is an overperformer. Who would have thought going into that game that Milton Williams would have been an impact player like that? They're such a deep team that you've got 2 guys who are probably 2 of their 4 or 5 best players that don't really do a whole lot statistically on the field, and they're still able to dominate it like that.
I mean, as I say, it was Milton Williams and Jordan Davis when you'd have expected it to be the 2 Georgia guys, Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter.
Yeah.
That's my turn to go to the board. I had shared what I'd used for my over and underperformers, and I got some backlash. So
Oh boy.
I am going along with the whole MVP strike about Jalen Hurts, because when you look, I'm gonna throw some stats at you, because when you look at them, he deserved it. Like we said, Saquon Barkley went home sleeping with that ring, and it wasn't like granted totally towards him helping the game. But Jalen Hurts, on the other hand, I really think, it goes towards the quarterback, but I really think he deserved it with the 222 passing yards, 72 rushing yards, which broke his own record in this one Super Bowl game by a QB. He had 2 touchdowns, and one of the first touchdown to get him on the board, which that brotherly shove, which I saw some Penn State students trying to recreate in the streets last night during that fun little celebration we had downtown. But you can't say, even if you want to say that the deep throws was missing, the Hail Marys were missing, those crazy plays that would get you in that highlight reel, he did what he had to do. And that's why I think like MVP, while it usually goes to a QB, it's not like he just got it handed to him. I think he played the game he needed to play. And it's his first Super Bowl ring, and someone who deserved their flowers, because we were talking about the season he had a couple years ago, 2022, when he was like looking up and playing that more consistently. I think though this year, it's like all that hard work over the years of slowly making it up that rank, and maybe not being that all-time GOAT ranking, but still earning those flowers. So I'm pleased with his MVP, honorable. With my underperformer, I'm going with Travis Kelce, because I've not been happy with him this season at all, this game at all. He had 39 receiving yards, he had 4 receptions. And then last year he had 93, which wasn't even looking too good last year either. But this year with 39, he had no touchdowns. He was silent in the game. And I feel like that's something we would have expected being the season that he's having. But then it's just at the same time, it's like, when is he going to get out of that funk? Because even though he did break a record for receiving yards in a Super Bowl, which was passing Jerry Rice, who had 33. Now, Travis Kelce got 3 in that game to get 34 and pass him, but he only had 4 receiving passes anyway. So if 3 of that 4 was going to get you that record-breaking, like how much, I don't know, I think that his 2022 and 2021 seasons led him up to where he only needs a couple more passes, a couple more rushes to get those stats on the board and break those records. But I wasn't really happy from what I saw from him. I'm not surprised, but I thought sometimes like a Super Bowl game would have it click for him, and it didn't.
Yeah, very underwhelming season for Kelce, I will say. He was just very, very disappointed in him. And I saw talk on the news about a possible retirement for Kelce. Is it time for
Really?
him to retire?
I mean,
Really?
he is, 35,
35
now.
36
Yeah.
now? I mean, you can only take so many years as a tight
Yeah.
end.
Mhm.
The tight end lifespan isn't very long, and especially after his underperforming regular season, a lot of people said that he was probably going to step it up in the playoffs because that's usually what he does, especially with how he played. It looked like he was kind of conserving himself. He had a great game against Houston. He had a iffy game against Buffalo, and people thought, okay, he's saving his best performance for the last one. You figured Philadelphia was going to key in on him, but not really like this.
No, it's just something where I was just like, I get it, because when you have an underwhelming season, it's not like you're going to come out and then you're going to score 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Usually, you're not going to do that. But it's just the fact of how much he went down from last year.
Mhm.
For having 93, which isn't even a lot for 2024
Yeah.
Super Bowl. Now you have 39 yards this year. Were you even on the field? Like, I don't know. I just didn't think that was something that. And then I was looking at his stats from 2021 and 2022. Completely blew him out of the water.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that's why it's kind of like, yeah, you broke that record last night of Jerry Rice, but you did it because you played so great 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And you only had a couple more yards to get. I don't know. I was like, but now we're going to go on to blind ranking the Super Bowl 59 moments, because there were some plays that are just like, we could get a handful, a couple like plays where it's just like, okay, like
There.
you're like, maybe not 5, maybe 3. But yeah, so we're going to go into ranking those.
Strip sack on Mahomes.
I mean, there were 6 of those.
Yeah.
I feel like this one was kind of the nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's
Yeah,
gotta
this
be
one
higher.
Yeah, it's
it
gotta
did
be up
come
there.
late in the game when it was still unlikely that the Chiefs were going to come back, but you couldn't really count them out. This was really
Was this late third quarter? or
this
I was
was
gonna say
it
it
was
was- I
pretty
think it
late
was
third
third
quarter.
quarter,
It was
yeah.
very unlikely,
Yeah.
but this was the absolute dagger
Yeah.
that there was no chance
Yeah.
of coming back.
Right. But it's plays like those where it's kind of like you know what I mean, when you conceal it so early because
Yeah.
you're like stopping
Yeah.
them. I mean, are we ranked?
Considering all the plays in this game, I feel like this has to be somewhat up there, but you still have the DeJean pick six, you have the Zach Bond interception. You've got a lot of other plays.
We
that
also
could
don't know
probably-
what we're about to see,
Yeah.
though.
So I
Yeah.
want to put this lower.
Oh, I was
No,
gonna
you
say
wanna
I'm
put
good.
it high?
I'm good
Well,
with
how
like
many
a
do we have?
3.
Okay,
I'm good
I
with
guess
like a
we can
middle
do
a
three.
middle ground.
Okay.
let's do 3. Let's do the next one.
This is the Zach
Zach
Bond
Bond
interception.
interception.
Okay.
Yeah.
This
Oh.
was extremely pivotal at the end of the half because if the Chiefs went down and scored at the end of the half, it would have been about a 10-point game. They would have gotten the ball. They would have still been hanging in there. But this was absolutely a momentum killer if there
Yeah.
was any momentum.
And a confidence killer, to say the least. I know these are grown men, but it's genuinely like a mentality thing too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's like you're on that high horse. You're like going. Okay, maybe we'll get a point on the board.
Nope.
Like you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like I'd pick this pretty high.
Yeah, I would put this above the
put it-
last one.
Okay,
I
so
would.
put it too.
Or
I
2?
put it
Let's
at
do
2.
2.
Honestly, I would have put the last one ahead of this one, but
Really?
we're past
Oh.
that at this point.
Oh no, I liked this one.
The pass breakup on 4th down.
Yeah.
Oh,
This was.
I was.
You want
I-
to put it below him?
It was all
the
right.
sack? Okay.
I mean,
I guess. I mean, he didn't catch it.
yeah.
He blocked it. So
That's true.
It was
I-
a nice play. I'm taking a strip sack over that. I'm taking an interception over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
completely
Let's
agree.
do 4.
I'm good with 4.
All right.
Here's
Oh
the
my
one we
gosh.
all,
Pick 6.
we're waiting for.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
I would probably put this at number
It has
1.
Yeah,
to be
me
number
too.
1. There was no better play.
I love him so much.
Yeah. Great. Great.
Okay,
guy.
we'll put this as number 1. I feel like that's a no-brainer.
That's what I was afraid of. So yeah,
I mean, I'm fine with the list. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
the game was already won at this point, but it
Yes,
wasn't
yeah.
that
It
pivotal.
wasn't game.
yeah.
a
This was
game-changing
more. This
play.
was
You
more
could put
just
it ahead
pouring
of
it on.
You could
it was,
put it ahead of the 4th down play, but I think the other 3
Yeah.
were bigger.
Yeah.
That too, and
So-
also like in the sense of this was supposed to happen. Like I like not in a way like it was a great play, but it's like that was in their playbook. Like I feel like the defense like showing out and then like sacking Patrick Mahomes, like that's something you can only if you can step up and do that.
Still was a gutsy call. Everyone thought that was the
Yeah.
point where the Eagles were going to start running the ball, try and get Saquon going, just to bleed the clock out. You go play action and throw a bomb. I don't think anyone thought that was going to happen. It was a great throw by Hurts.
it's nice so that they have a deep team where they can do these things.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
crazy.
for
I'm
sure.
sure Andy Reid went into it thinking get Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like
And
when
you
Penn State
live
went in
with
was like
Hurts
get,
trying to make these throws, but it was at the point in the game where Hurts had the confidence to make that
Yeah.
throw. And
right. You know what I mean? It's
Exactly.
like a
Yeah.
But
safety,
had
like a
they-
safety
Yeah.
blanket with the score
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
everything. I
At
get
the
that.
same time, though, I mean, if I'm the Chiefs, I'm doing the same thing because I think had Hurts been forced to make plays like this in a couple previous games, like against the Rams, I don't think the
Mhm.
Eagles are here.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
if it wasn't
Yeah.
a blind ranking, I'd probably have it higher than 5, but
Right.
I'm-
Yeah.
Higher than 5,
I'm
but
fine with it
Yeah.
being
Yeah,
for the
I-
rest
Not
of the
terrible.
list.
I'm so
Yeah.
glad we got the
I
other
don't
one.
think I'd put
Yes.
out of these. I don't think I'd put it higher than 4. So I don't have a problem with it
Okay.
being at the bottom.
Well, now we ranked our plays, and now we're gonna do some like way too early free agency. Like it's literally the day after, but people are already talking about it.
Mhm.
So, like, what do you think, Haley, was good on free agency? Any predictions? Anything you want to see?
I think that for certain teams, there has to be a lot that happens. And one team I want to talk about specifically, staying in the NFC East, is the Commanders. I think there's some big defensive players and Zach Ertz that are going into the free agency, but they have this $78 million in cap space that they have the ability to bring certain players back. And
Mhm.
I think that could rearrange the Eagles coming off of the Super Bowl, how the Eagles Commanders works out in their division.
I love the Commanders
Mhm.
personally. I do. They have 28 people
Mhm.
that are eligible for agency, and all their wide
Mhm.
receivers are except for Terry McLaurin.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just like, but you know, you have that rookie QB contract, and he
Mhm.
did very well.
And especially the
Yes.
way they played this year, it's a hot commodity for free agents. They're going to want to go to Washington
Yes,
now. You
yes.
wouldn't have said that 2 or 3 years
100%.
ago, even
And-
last year. But
No, so that's why I'm kind of like,
It's amazing what new ownership does.
right, right. You think I would need the Jets to bring that on
There's
over?
a few
Yeah.
teams that could use that.
Yeah, but that's why I'm just thinking, like, for the Commanders, I'm really not too worried about them,
No.
especially for like draft wise. I know they're going to be low in the draft, but I think
Yeah.
though they can get quality low players in the draft if they play their cards
Yeah.
right.
But the Eagles are now the team to beat, so the Commanders need to like step it up
Yeah.
a little bit if they
Mhm.
want to win their division.
Yeah.
That's going to be.
And I
good.
think it is defensively that they have. So I think they're going to
Yes.
be fine on offense. I think they have to step it up defensively.
Yeah.
Yeah,
100%.
which is doable.
Mhm.
And what other teams you guys thinking about?
I think the most interesting team is the Patriots because of how much money they have to spend. I think they have like 120 million in cap
Wow.
space.
Mhm.
They've got a young team, new coaching staff. Drake May is going to be in year 2. I liked his draft stock coming out of college more than Jaden Daniels. Obviously, Jaden Daniels is the better player this year, but you know it's still impossible to say that he's going to have a better career than Drake May because look at. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is a perfect example. He didn't even play his first year.
That's true.
So, and I think May is the better mold of an NFL quarterback. He's got the size. He's got a little bit more arm talent than Daniels, but he can run when he has to. So I think that is going to be an attractive destination. And then, as I mentioned, for the Chiefs, probably going after more on the offensive line, and then also that big-time receiver. And it kind of goes back to what we were mentioning with Kelsey kind of tailing off. That made up for some of their ability to play without that number one receiver. Now not having that, I think they have to go after that top receiver this free agency cycle.
I agree with you on that. What are
I'm
you looking
gonna
at?
stick with the 2 Super Bowl teams because I think this is very pivotal off seasons for them.
Yeah.
For the Eagles, the only guys that you have to re-sign or could potentially walk in free agency: Zach Bond, Montez Sweat, and Mekhi Becton.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
Everybody else is under contract.
Yeah.
You're thinking Bond is probably going to leave. He'll probably get a huge contract somewhere else.
Mhm.
You live with that. You could probably, the way he was brought in this year, you could probably get someone else to fill that hole, develop him,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
Vic Fangio kind of did.
And everyone's gonna be looking to go on the Eagles. I feel like
Oh,
now.
Uh-huh.
With the
And
depth, if they can fill that spot, they
Yeah.
want
And
to be on that
especially-
team.
Yeah.
you look at their rumors. Myles Garrett might get
Mhm.
traded.
Hmm.
You've seen what Howie Roseman can do. You can see what he does in the draft. You've got a lot of you got Kenyon Mitchell, you got Cooper DeJean, your 2 big rookies.
Mhm.
They're under contract for a while now. Jalen Hurts, for a big time quarterback, he's not getting paid that much. You have a lot of freedom to still add stuff to this team that, as we saw last night, is already the best in the league.
Yeah.
So I think this is really the chance. If they want to start this kind of dynasty, I think this is a very
I
big
agree.
offseason to do
and
it.
go into that 2P, 3P, like go
Mhm.
into that where you are becoming a Super Bowl kind of expectation.
Uh-huh.
I would be
Yeah.
surprised if they go after Myles Garrett because I think if they have the money, they're going to look to re-sign Bond as opposed to bringing in Myles
I would think
Garrett.
so. If you
Yeah.
can re-sign Bond, I would do it. But we've seen what Roseman can do as far as offers go. If Cleveland doesn't have necessarily the leverage and you can kind of lowball for Garrett, if you can do that, I would prioritize re-signing Bond just because you know that
But
works.
there's going to be a team that's going
There's
to
gonna
pay a
be-
higher price
mhm,
at that
because
point.
the Eagles have
especially
already-
with what the Eagles have on the defensive line now. probably bringing Sweat back because he'd be a more affordable option. So I'd be very surprised if we see Myles Garrett in midnight green next year.
I'm kind of concerned what the Vikings are going to do because they don't have crazy amount of money. At $58 million, which is like, oh my God, it's not crazy amount of money. But compared to like other teams and the salaries that they are looking to pay off, like they do have some people are going into free agency. I'm concerned about. Not concerned, but wondering what they're going to do about their QB situation. Being with JJ McCarthy now, he's coming off that injury, so you can't rely on him too much. But do you want to pay out Sam Darnold and give him a huge contract and kind of not waste, but give him a lot of money to keep what he's doing? Or then JJ McCarthy comes back, ends up being a great QB. And
if you would have asked me in week 16, I would have said you have to pay Darnold. But the way that he performed at the end of the regular season and in the playoffs, I don't think it's worth throwing out your cap space just to re-sign him when you have this rookie that you can see what he can do. You're going to get a team. I'm thinking my pick would be that the Giants sign Darnold, and I would imagine they're going to give him big money. That's who I think they're going to, and I think he's going to go to one of those bad teams that's going to be able to pay him a lot. If I'm the Vikings, I would worry about filling out the rest of the roster.
I think it is going to be JJ McCarthy because he was kind of in a similar situation that we were talking about with Jalen Hurts in college, where he didn't have to do a whole lot, but when he was asked to, he did.
He was able to.
And like, I think unlike Jalen Hurts this year, he's done it in the past, but unlike Jalen Hurts this year, there were times where he had to be the guy to go step up and win a game. And he's made some of the best throws that I've ever seen. So I think that he's got the talent, and I think that's probably where you lean if you're the Vikings. Let JJ McCarthy take over, see what happens next year, and if it works out, then you've got your guy for the future.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see. I mean, this free agency is going to be very interesting. But thank you guys so much for tuning into our Super Bowl recap. This is our last football show of the semester. Well, the season's over, so glad we got in for this conversation. But tune in for tomorrow. We have another great show for you guys. And I'm Sophia, Haley, Jacob, and Brendan. And thanks, guys, for watching.